I got to tell you, pre-COVID, I traveled a lot. And so I would walk through the Dallas Love Field Airport and think, oh my goodness, we ought to be in here. Like we truly ought to be here and in here. And you know how I am, Tex, kind of like world domination, takeover spirit. I'm like, we got to do a takeover of this airport. And of course, when I start to envision a complete takeover, having the Mavs out there, a whole new look, of course, you know who I thought about. There's one person who I know who carry out that vision for us, and that's of course you, Tex. So it was. Thank you for like really leading and carrying out that vision. Why did you think it was a good fit for us?
I just think, it was an interesting time, obviously, with COVID hitting. And I just think it was something that we could do to obviously speak to the team spirit, but just also to uplift everybody, and their coming and goings. And it gave us an opportunity with the airport being down traffic-wise for a while, that when everybody got a chance to start to come back to travel, they got something that was warm and inviting and spoke to them from this city.
Hey, hello everybody. Welcome to today's show of Lead with Love presented by Dallas Love Field. I'm Anthony Hill, Head of Regional Partnerships at UberEats. I'm here with my boy Sterling Melville, Senior Strategy Manager at Pepsico and the President of the Melville Family Foundation. Sterling, appreciate you coming and joining me here today, man.
What's up, everybody? And always good to talk to you, my man. So glad to be here having this conversation. Shout out to my favorite airport, Dallas Love Field, Lead with Love, for giving us this platform to have this discussion.
Yeah, and hello to everybody on Facebook, everybody on YouTube. Now, so with each episode, a little bit about what we do here. Dallas Love Field's Lead with Love. It has different voices from across North Texas to talk about strong leadership, respect from a diversity and inclusion standpoint, and a celebration of local culture, and talk about how to make a difference here in our community.
Right on. And then later on, we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A. So leave your questions for Anthony and I in the comment section, and we'll do our best to get to them.
So let's jump right in, man. Let's go to the first question. Let's put it up there. So Ster, this is for you. What do you do to create an environment of inclusion and openness when talking about social issues at work?
I think for me, it's really twofold, right? I think it starts with displaying the sort of behavior that you look for in others. It's difficult to create an environment of trust and honesty if your actions can be perceived as dishonest. So I think the first thing is kind of modeling that sort of behavior that you're looking for others to replicate. And then the second piece of that, I think, would be learning or gaining the discernment to be able to decide or distinguish between intent and impact. Because people can have good intentions, but the impact of their words or their behavior may be harmful to others. So in those instances, you want to lead with love and use those as teachable moments. But at the end of the day, you really want to assume positive intent, because the only way that we make progress is, through dialogue. And you don't want people to be so fearful of entering the conversation if they're intent and impact is misaligned. So, you want to let people know that, hey, as long as you have the proper intent, we can work through the impact, even if it does kind of lead itself to a teachable moment.
Man, intent, that's powerful. And you know what I think is, something that's really stuck with me on this is like, as a hiring manager and in tech, I've had folks who are interviewing who've just told me, like, off the record, like, man, it's really refreshing to see somebody who looks like me interviewing. Like, as I've gone across the interview process, like, that's not something I typically see. And it's definitely not something I take for granted, because like, it's no secret to me that the majority of the rooms that I'm in, like, it's usually not too many people of color and minorities in it. But what I think, is important, man, is exactly what you said about like, being a reflection of what you expect to see from others, because people are going to look at what you're doing, right? Whether they are or not. And, you can preach the gospel, you can say whatever you want, but if you're not leading by that and living by that, and you're not having grace with others, then like, it's going to be a moot point. No one's going to really hear you out on that. And so, man, I love that you're talking about like, you got to make sure that your intent matches what you're actually doing in your actions, because that's huge up there.
Yeah, no, and you touched on something, you said something powerful there. I mean, I think there are times that we can take our presence for granted. Like, you should never take your presence for granted, because simply showing up, it may potentially be inspiring somebody. So I think the older I get, the more kind of cognizant I become of just my space in this world. It becomes more apparent to me that just showing up sometimes is impactful for people. So not taking that for granted either.
Man, hey, you and I talked about this last year is, this last year was a heck of a year, just as far as, from all, you can go from the social injustice, you can go from staying at home, like you name it. And it kind of blended that work and home life, because we were all working from home. And so, at Uber, we were having these conversations, we were calling them forums, where we were just basically talking about what was going on. And, initially I had some hesitancy, because I'm like, man, I'm not just going to speak up because like it's expected of me to speak up. But then, what you said, man, if we're going to have an environment of inclusion and openness, like sometimes the burden falls on you, right? Like, you got to lead by example and be the one willing to open up that conversation. Because if you don't open it up, man, you can't just count on others to open it up. So I think one of the things about inclusion and openness, and like, how do you create that environment, is you have to be the environment. If you're not willing to be it, like, I can guarantee you from experience, nobody else is going to be that, right?
So let me ask you this then. How do you maintain your sanity, though, if you will? Because, it's not our job to walk around ridding or correcting the world of ignorance. You know what I mean? Like, you can't take on every single battle. So how do you decide like when it's appropriate to speak up and, when to kind of pull back, just so you can kind of protect your peace? Because, it's impossible to address everything, right?
Man, speak on that. Like, I think what's important, man, is having some self-awareness and some honesty with yourself. Like, I could be the first to admit candidly that, there were some dark days, especially over the last year, like you said, man, trying to put on that front at work and then getting off work. And it was affecting like my marriage, it was just reflecting against like my mental and my social. And like, I had to like take a seat and be like, all right, man, like, you can't solve the world's problems in a day, but also had to continue to encourage yourself to know that like, yeah, you can't solve them in a day, but if you don't do anything at all, they'll never get solved. And I know, with the work you guys are doing with the foundation, amongst other things, like you know that your parents had you guys out there, Thanksgiving, every year since you could walk, right?
Every year, man. So it's definitely kind of instilled in me, and through the work that we're doing with the foundation, it has really helped keep my feet on the ground like these past 12 months. So like you mentioned, I'm the president of our foundation, Melville Family Foundation. We are kind of focused on three main areas: economic stability, food insecurity, and academic excellence for Black and brown children in South Dallas. So, I think we all have the tendency to just become so consumed, with our own issues, that if you just are able to kind of take a step back and survey the landscape, you're able to realize that, hey, we actually, things are not so bad. And through a lot of the work that we're doing with this foundation, I get to hear just some incredible stories about, our scholars, our parents, our teachers, just people who really don't have much, but still find ways to be happy and be grateful. So it's just been, it's been an extremely humbling experience for me.
Hey, let me ask you this, man, because you wear many hats. You're the president of the foundation. You're a leader at PepsiCo. How have you evolved and changed as a leader? Like now that you're in a position of power and a position to manage others, to help people, other minorities, people of color, succeed in the corporate world or succeed like outside of the corporate world too, like in the community.
I think for me, honestly, like the biggest change has just been a greater sense of responsibility. It's acknowledging that, I grew up with access to resources, access to people, and access to money. And, the older I get, the more apparent it becomes that, I am where I am, in part because of that access. Like, yeah, I've had to work hard. Like, yeah, I've had to make good decisions along the way. But, having access to those resources, people, and power certainly played a part in it as well. And I think that, part of my purpose is to advocate on behalf of the people that don't have access to the rooms that I do, and just really becoming aware of that, I've got friends that I love, near and dear, that have had a much harder time navigating their careers professionally, not for lack of competency or lack of work ethic, but for lack of access, so when you just become aware of that, I think we all have an obligation, to do something for those that can't do for themselves.
Dude, that's powerful, man. One thing I found that you kind of touched on is like, we talked about it earlier about, impact and is being really intentional. That's one thing I've learned as I've become, more of a leader and how to help others is like, you can't wait. Like, for example, if you're looking for that promotion, you can't wait until you get promoted to do that job, right? Like you got to start showing the signs of being able to do it then and there. So if you want to make a change and a difference, like you can't talk about the things you want to do. Like you got to, put your feet on and shoes on and start walking. So like one of the things that I've really, tried to take on is like, hey, how do I use my position to leverage and create opportunities for others? So, what we started as a pro network for our Black at Uber ERG, where like anyone in sales can come jump in and we could talk about deals you're going through. We could talk about, how to navigate internally, how to deal with conflict, like conversations you're not really having, especially early in your life until maybe you've gone through them and you've messed them up. So it's like, hey, how do we get ahead of that? And so like, I think, the key is really being able to say like, hey, what things do you and I have access to that we know that we're privileged to have had that access to, and how do you be able to shine that light on others and give them a taste of it so, they can have their own version of that access,
So, one thing that corporations love telling their employees is, bring your entire self to work or bring your full self to work. But oftentimes for minorities or people of color, that takes on a kind of a different meaning. So how do you, navigate that, where you're at in your space, being authentic, bringing your full self to work? How do you approach that?
Man, that's something you got to, like a challenge you got to work on daily. But I think knowing that if you think about working 40 hours a week, like at minimum, a lot of us are putting in a little bit of extra time. That's 2,000 hours a year, right? That you're putting in to being somewhere. And it's like, once you realize the impact of that's having on your life, the time and energy and effort you're putting into it, man, you start to feel a little bit more comfortable to be like, I got to be able to walk in my skin and give yourself that permission. Because I think once you give yourself that permission to say, like, if I can't be my authentic self here, or at least, close to that version, like, what am I really doing here? And, I think I read somewhere that like over this summer, as we're coming out, knock on wood, of the other side of this pandemic, and, folks are getting back to the real world, that like, they say 50% of people who are currently looking for jobs, even if they have them, and 1 in 4 will quit, whether it's for another job or to move somewhere else here in the next 3 months. That's what they're projecting. So like, that lets me know that people have done some reflecting and deciding like, man, I want to be authentic and I want to be walking in my purpose. And so I think we have to give ourselves that permission to say, hey, these are the things that we've learned and how we feel. Like, let's act on that. Let's be about that.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm definitely walking in your purpose.
Yeah, hey, I think we're getting some comments, man, to just, real quick, talk a little bit about like, hey, the mission of the Melville Family Foundation, what that looks like in South Dallas and what you guys are focused on.
Yeah, so like I mentioned a little earlier, we're focused kind of on three primary areas: academic excellence, food insecurity, and academic excellence, food insecurity, and economic stability. I'm sorry. So, understanding that the nonprofit world can be a little bit fragmented. So what we've tried to do is find, strategic partnerships to amplify not only our resources, but our impact. So we've got a partnership with Uplift, which is a charter organization, schools across Dallas. We've got a partnership with North Texas Food Bank to make strides with food insecurity. And then we've also got a partnership with Big Thought, which is an organization that partners with school districts to do work with the curriculum, really focusing on the arts as kind of a medium. So, it's definitely a family affair. Both of my brothers are involved. My youngest brother is our operations director. My middle brother, Tyler, who also works with Pepsi, he's the marketing director. My mom's CEO, my dad's the chairman. So, I mean, it's definitely our legacy, right? Our name is on it. Legacy is more. So, the older I get, the more kind of focused I become on, okay, what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want people to say, when you're not around anymore? So I think this is definitely kind of part of that.
So a lot of good work already has happened. You guys have been doing a lot of great stuff in the community, but like there's a lot to be done still, right? Like I think we'd be remiss not to admit that. So, what do you think the next step is for like advancing social injustice, not just like in our community, but maybe even at the workplace too?
Yeah, I think, it's kind of twofold. Like you said, I mean, there's a lot that still needs to be done. So the question could be answered in a number of different ways. But I think for me, the first thing is it starts with exposure. When you have, kids in particularly that come from, impoverished areas, they aren't exposed to certain things. So if you've got a kid that's growing up in a certain area, like, why would he think that he can be a business professional if he doesn't even know any business professionals? So I think that the first thing is like exposing, these kids at a younger age to, some of the different avenues, obviously education being a huge piece of that. But once you have the exposure, then you have to, give them opportunities. So once you kind of open their mind to thinking along different pathways and exploring different avenues, then you have to present them with the opportunities to, to kind of further explore those. So we're in the process of standing up internships. We've got career days where we've got, business professionals that come down and talk to our scholars. We've got a literacy program where we are, reading to scholars, a little bit of spending time reading. We've got a partnership with Ericsson where we're doing a robotics camp.
Well, that's dope.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So we're just doing a lot of really good things, man, because, you typically don't think about kids in the inner city getting an opportunity to go to robotics camp. So, really just trying to increase the exposure.
Dude, exposure is key. You said like, robotics. I think seeing is believing a lot of times. And a lot of times what you're seeing in the inner city is you see athletes, you see, performers. And so like, hey, naturally that's what you want to be, right? So like getting exposure to that kind of stuff is really, really important. I think something that's really come up to me, if you look at the corporate side, the word accountability comes up to me because, I mean, we could probably make a long receipt list of folks who made pledges about what they were going to do from a corporate standpoint, had the catchy little slogans online for a little bit, put up the black squares on Instagram. But then, we're about a year later and like not much change has happened. And so, I think even like Lead with Love, like this is a great platform to be able to showcase like, hey, there's other things out there for minorities, for people of color to do, and there's ways to shine and again, walk in your purpose. And like, we definitely need more of this. I think if you look at it, like I saw a lot of pledges for people to have more diversity on their boards. And I think there was an article like a month ago that said like out of the S&P 500, there's still like 100 of those companies that have no Black people on their boards. And it's like, you know, the workplace should be a reflection, in my opinion, of like the world I walk around in. And like, that doesn't look like the world that I walk around in. So I think representation is definitely a next step that we have to keep pushing on. We have to keep using our platforms to be able to say like, hey, the past is the past. We're not going to stand for that anymore. Like the future is the only way we can go.
Yeah, I mean, agree 100%. I think it's definitely up to us to hold these organizations accountable. You know, I will say that I feel fortunate to be at an organization like Pepsi that has, you know, taken a strong stance just in the journey toward racial equality. We definitely have a long way to go, but there's certainly been a sincere effort. You know, there's been dollars, you know, contributed to standing initiatives up, as well as you know, actual opportunities that have been presented to you know, different people of color in the organization, allowing them to kind of advance their career. So proud to be in an organization like that.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, speaking of representation, accountability, you know, again, shout out to Love Field for doing this Lead with Love. Sir, have you been to the airport lately?
No, I have not, but I've got a trip coming up in August that I'm going to be flying through Love Field, so I'm looking forward to it. Man,
I was just there not too long ago. I think earlier, but before this kicked off, during the intro, we showed a clip of that Dallas Mavericks takeover of like level 2 inside Garage C. And so like, man, I got to tell you, I like to Uber everywhere that I go. But when I go to the airport, I like to drive. Like that art installation is like one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Especially as a Mavs fan. Like shout out to the Mavs season tickets seat holder event. I think it's like July 12th, July 15th. Quick plug there because I will be there getting my seats, man. But you know, I think it's definitely something we should talk about. You know, I think you saw the photo of it, man. What did you think of like the graffiti art inside of it?
I mean, it was incredible. I mean, I'll definitely have to park there next time I fly to check that out live. Yeah, I think it's incredible.
Yeah, no, for sure. Okay, it's time for some quick rapid fire Q&A. So go ahead, throw those on the screen, and man, and we will get these rolling. So, Ster, what would your walk-up song be, and why that song?
My walk-up song, honestly, it's probably gonna have to be Future March Madness. That's what song I'm coming out to. You know, being, you know, and you and I are old time hooping buddies. You know, we went to rival high schools. I won't take the conversation there, but
you don't want to.
March, you know, March just being the time that all hoopers love, just because of March Madness and the tournament. And I think, you know, music just has an ability to take you back in time to a place where you were when you heard that song. So, you know, we were playing when that song first came out. So it's just kind of one of those songs that gets me in a good mood and brings me back to a good place when we was playing ball and kind of, you know, having that team and everybody around you.
Yeah, for sure. This is a great question. And before I answer it, he doesn't want to go back to the rival days because Plano used to give those boys a whooping. I'll leave that there. But man, I think if I had to do my walk up song, it's "Tell the World" by Lecrae. And what I really like about it is, like, you know, the chorus is saying, you know, I'm a billboard, I'm a mouthpiece. And it's just like a reflection of how you live your life through faith. Like, I think my dad used to tell me all the time is that, you know, your life may be the only Bible that people read. And so it's like, man, how do you want to walk in your purpose knowing that you have that kind of responsibility? So a song like that, man, talks a lot about, you know, living for others and living through example. So I think that's what I'm going to go with for my song. Okay, we talked about this, but I'm going to ask you now, if you had to park, take a ride share, or get a ride home from a friend or family to Love Field, which would you choose?
It's hard. I mean, you know, I'm typically a ride share guy, but if I'm going to Love Field, I'm definitely parking. I mean, it's hands down.
Yeah, I mean, this is a quick one. Parking, I want the convenience of having my car. I feel safe knowing that, you know, we have a good parking garage to go into. And they're really affordable. Like, that's something that people don't talk about enough. I remember back in the day, it used to be like, we have to all ride share to get there, but it's very affordable to park there now. So that's the quickest rapid fire for that one we could probably do.
Especially as a Mavs fan, you got to park there.
Have to. Now this is a good one here, Sterling. What does lead with love mean to you?
I think for me, leading with love, like, really means just kind of leading with empathy, and truly kind of putting yourself in someone else's shoes. I think too often we make incorrect assumptions about people. So I think leading with love is assuming positive intent, especially with people that you've got these pre-existing relationships with. It can be a little bit more challenging, right? With strangers, when you don't have all of the context to properly place their actions. But I think leading with love is leading with empathy and, just kind of assuming positive intent for your fellow man.
Yeah, I think listening and being having an empathetic ear is definitely leading with love. I think the other word, and I've probably said this maybe 1,000 times just today, is being intentional, is leading with love, right? So, anytime that we're going here and we're talking about, hey, how do you, like, I'm in sales, right? So that means my goal is to hit a quota, but like, that's not my day to day. My day to day is how do I hit that quota, right? It's sales calls, it's meetings, it's like everything that you do to go into it. So I think leading with love means, if that's the mindset that you want to have, then your day to day and your actions need to line up with that. The way you mentor people, the way you help people, the way you spend your time. So I think that's a really good one for me, is to say, being intentional. All right, now it's time for some audience Q&A here. Let's see what the first one we have going. So Helen wants to know, as young Black professionals who have access to those rooms, how do you prepare for, navigate, and respond to microaggressions you may come across? You want to take this first? Or you want me to take this one first?
You go ahead and jump it off. That's a great question.
Helen, great question. Yeah. I hate to say it, man, but preparation comes from a lot of life experiences that we probably wish we didn't have before we got here. Those microaggressions aren't reserved for the corporate world. You've been told that. I'm sure, Sterling, as you walk around being 6'4", people might be like, "Oh, I'm sure you play basketball, right?" Like, just a stereotypical thing to say, and you got to kind of smile and keep it moving. So I think, Helen, the way that you prepare for this is like, knowing what your purpose is, knowing why you're there, and knowing that whatever it is that someone reflects and brings to you is not a reflection of who you are, but it's what they're bringing to you, and that the best response and the best way that you can act is in a way that's going to best reflect you. So if you're like, hey, I'm here to give my presentation, I'm here to do a job, making sure that you have whatever it is that's your task at hand top of mind. Ster, what you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and candidly, I think one that I'm still figuring out, and one that I'm still kind of learning how to navigate through. I will say that one thing that I really learned from this past year is that opportunity is created from chaos. So I don't think that anybody would argue that 2020 was maybe the most chaotic year on record.
Yeah.
But there was opportunities that were kind of created from some of that chaos. And I think for the first time in my professional life, I was able to walk into work and truly say, how I felt when somebody asked me, just kind of prior to 2020, it's like, how you doing? Fine, but it's like now people were really asking, genuinely, how are you doing? And for the first time, I felt like I could be honest. So I think in terms of like navigating microaggressions, it's acknowledging them, and like acknowledging that, those types of things do impact you. And I think organizations, specifically Pepsi, have done a good job of creating space for minorities and people of color to socialize these types of issues and see what other people are doing that are working, because like there's no one size fits all on dealing with some of these things. I think we think that the human experience is like super unique, but it's really not. Anything that you're going through, will go through, have been through, somebody else has already done it. So it's just about like finding the mentorship, finding the sponsorship, reading the books and leaning on your support system, I think.
Yeah, that's very well said. I I think we got another one here popping up. Question here from Heather. Let's see. Hey, Stir, does the Melville Family Foundation provide scholarships to some of the educational opportunities like robotics camps and other initiatives you guys are rolling through?
Yes, so we do currently have scholarship program. And in terms of our robotics program, I know we have kind of limited capacity, but that is free of charge to, might need to walk that back. I'll need to confirm with our ops director, my younger brother, Miles Melville, but I believe that is free of charge to our scholars. But I'll follow up with Heather.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm gonna do a shameless plug here. Follow them on all the social media handles to get the latest of what's going on. Visit the website. Miles will, Sterling's brother, will definitely make sure to follow up and get that taken care of. Let's see here. I think we have one more coming through. So Don wants to know, what advice do you have for young people of color who think corporate America may not be a realistic goal for them? Who, you want to take this? You want me to take this?
Yeah, I could take it. I mean, I would challenge them and first ask why. Why do you think that corporate America might not be a good fit for you? Because I think, is it because they feel that it's unattainable? Is it because they don't want to, have to assimilate to a culture that they feel is counter to, their own? But I think kind of peeling back the layers on that and understanding it is a little bit better, because it might just be a matter of finding the right corporation, with the right, kind of company culture and the right sort of leadership. So I think, fit really matters when looking for employment. It's less about sometimes your job title or your job function, but more about the people and the values that an organization holds.
Yeah, and the last thing before we wrap here is I would just encourage them to have conversations. Like, there's plenty of people out there who want to help. There's plenty of people who are doing it, and I know that maybe not everybody has access. But platforms like the foundation, Legacy is More, our podcast, we're always highlighting different professionals who look like who are people of color and look like kids who might be having these doubts. There's a lot of people who want to help, and there's a lot of space for everybody. And so, Don, I would just encourage them to speak up about that, because they're not the only ones having those feelings. And, they'll be happy. They'll be happy to know that, even as leaders, sometimes I feel like I'm an imposter syndrome sitting in a room. So 100% hear that. So Stir, man, I really appreciate you jumping in here with us, man. This was great. Now comes the hard time of it, where we got to say goodbye. If you guys are listening on the podcast, every other Tuesday, 12:30 p.m. Central, on the Dallas Love Field Facebook page and the YouTube channel, they do go live. So if you heard these live Q&As, that's where they're coming in from. We'd love to hear from you guys next time. Don't forget to check out the previous episodes that we've had and the future ones coming up. So please give this a 5-star rating. We hope to hear from you soon. And Stir, again, man, really appreciate the time. It's always great having these combos.
Always, always. Thanks for having me. Dallas Love Field, lead with love. We out.
Peace.